Hello children, a warm welcome to today's class children. And today we are going to do a very beautiful and a very interesting poem. That is poem 7, The Stolen Boat. Before I begin the class, I have some things to show you. Now these things are something that you like. For example, teddy bear, cycle, some eatables like burger, french fries, and then electronic gadgets, makeup set and storybook. Now these are some of the things that you like. Now in case if you are given a chance, which one of these would you like to steal and why? I know stealing is bad, but in case you get a chance of stealing one of these things, which one would you choose? Okay, if you are a lover of teddy, you will definitely pick teddy. And if you are a person who loves sports and who are more active, you will definitely pick the cycle. And if you are a foodie, you will definitely pick the burger and the french fries, isn't it? And if you are a science geek, then definitely you will go for all the articles, your science apparatus things that you require. And if you love to beautify yourself, then you will definitely pick the makeup set. And if you are a lover of books, then definitely you will go with books, isn't it? Now children, how would you feel after stealing? Yes, initially you will feel very happy that you grabbed whatever you liked, but you will start regretting later, isn't it? Now, in this poem too, the poet shares a similar experience. So, who is this poet? Yes, so let's know about the poet. Yeah, I hope you recognize this great poet. You know, he is called as the nature poet. Any bell ringing? Yes, he is William Wordsworth. Now, let's know more about him, children. So, William Wordsworth was born on 7th April 1770, Cockersmouth, United Kingdom. His parents were John Wordsworth and Anne Cookson. He began writing poetry as a young boy in grammar school. See, he has started writing poetry from a very young age. And before graduating from college, he went on a walking tour of Europe, which deepened his love for nature and his sympathy for the common man. Both major themes in his poetry. So, if you have come across his poems, so you will definitely find that his love for nature and also his association with common man is expressed in all his poems, children. Wordsworth is best known for lyrical ballads, which was co-written with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who is also a poet. And he died on 23rd April 1850 in United Kingdom. So, some of his famous works are I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, The Prelude, The World is Too Much with Us and The Solitary Reaper. Now children, let's learn some of the meaning of some new words that we are going to come across in today's poem. You are ready? Yes. Now the first one is willow tree. A tree that grows near water with thin flexible branches. You can see these thin flexible branches. No? Unloosen means make it loose, undo something. For example, see here, the cowboy unloosened the rope and saved the girl. Unswerving means steady, constant or straight. For example, Mr. Karthik's unswerving devotion to his duty led him to succeed in his profession. Summit means top. For example, man can climb to the highest summit, means to the highest top, but he cannot dwell there long, he cannot stay there for long. Crag out means a high rough mass of rock which sticks from the land around it. Elfin pinnace means small fairy like boat. You can see here, okay. So, elfin means small magical creatures. So, elephant pinnace is a small fairy like boat. Lustily means passionately, with great happiness. So, the child eats the ice cream lustily. Oars means long poles with flat ends which are used for rowing a boat. Next, heaving means rising up. See here, the water was heaving up in great swells. So, horizon means skyline where the earth and sun seems to meet. For example, the sun went down below the horizon. Stature means height. For example, though Bernard was short in stature, he was known for his brilliance among his friends. So, though he was short, he was known for his brilliance. Grim means frightful or fierce. So, you can see the expression of the boss here. The facial expression of the boss was grim when he told his workers that the company was closing because of loss. Next, strode means walk with long steps. For example, the teacher strode angrily into the classroom. Now, when you would make noise, the teacher would walk in heavy steps to shout at you. Mooring place means a place of shelter where the boat is usually tethered for safety. Bark means boat. Then meadow means grassland. And spectacle means sight. The children enjoy looking at the spectacle of fireworks. Solitude means loneliness or to be alone. For example, sometimes a little solitude is just what you need to clear your mind. So, with this we have come to end of learning some new words that's going to appear in this poem, children. Now, let's go to reading of the poem. For that, please turn to page number 107 in your textbook, and shall we read the poem then? Yes. Poem 7, The Stolen Boat, written by William Wordsworth. One summer evening, led by her, I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cave, its usual home. Straight I unloosened her chain and stepping in, pushed from the shore. It was an act of slith and troubled pleasure, nor without the voice of mountain echoes did my boat move on, leaving behind her still on either side small circles glittering idly in the moon, until they melted all into one track of sparkling light. But now, like one who rose, proud of his skill, to reach a chosen point within an unswerving line, I fix my gaze. Upon the summit of a craggy ridge, the horizon's utmost boundary, far above was nothing but the stars and the grey sky. She was an elephant pinnace, Leslie. I dipped my oars into the silent lake, and as I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan, went from behind the craggy steep till then. The horizon's bound a huge peak, black and huge, as if with voluntary power instinct. Upreared its head, I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim face towered up between me and the stars, and still, for so it seemed, with purpose of its own and measured motion like a living thing, strode after me. With trembling oars I turned, and through the silent water stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. There in the mooring place I left my bark, and through the meadows homeward went in grave and serious mood. But after I had seen that spectacle for many days, my brain worked with the dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being over my thoughts. There hung a darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion. No familiar shapes remained, No pleasant images of trees, of sea or sky, no colors of green fields, but huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men, move slowly through the mind by day and were a trouble to my dreams. So children, with this we have come to the end of reading the poem. So now let's know about the background of this poem before we analyze the poem, children. The Stolen Boat is an extract from 8,400 line autobiographical poem The Prelude, which was meant to be the preface or the introduction of even longer poem The Recluse. This title was given to the poem by Wordsworth's widow Mary and was published after his death. Since this poem is an extract from the poem The Prelude, it is one verse of 44 lines. In this poem, Wordsworth recounts an episode from his childhood when he stole a small boat and rowed to the middle of a lake at night. Now children, let's analyze the poem. As you know that this poem is a stanza of 44 lines. Now for better understanding, I have divided them to some lines here. So now let's take the first 5 lines here, children. One summer evening, led by her, I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cave, its usual home. Straight I unloosened her chain and stepping in, pushed from the shore. It was an act of stealth. Now children, one summer evening led by her I found. Now, who does I in the line refer to? Yes, it refers to the poet. Now, what does her in the first line refer to? Here, what does her mean? Here, her means it refers to nature. So, here the poet was led by nature to steal the boat. Now, where was the boat moored? You can see the picture. It was inside a rocky cave tied to a willow tree. Straight, I unloosened her chain. What does her refer to? Yes, here her refers to the boat. Now, what sleepy act does the boy commit? Yes, the boy takes away the boat without the permission of the owner of the boat. Now, let's move on to the next lines, children. And troubled pleasure, nor without the voice of mountain echoes, did my boat mourn, leaving behind her still on either side, small circles glittering idly in the moon. Now, what does the poet mean by troubled pleasure? So, we know that he has stolen the boat. Now, why is he being troubled there? Here, the poet does not inform the owner or takes his permission to use the boat. It was an act of stealing, and his joy and thrill of adventure were troubled by the sense of guilt. Now, what sound is captured in these lines? So, as he is rowing, he hears to some sound. So, what are they? Yes, mountain echoes of the sound of the oars splashing in the water. So, here's the sound of the mountain echoes. Now, let's move on to the next lines. Until they melted all into one track of sparkling light. But now, like one who rose, proud of his skill to reach a chosen point within an unswerving line, I fix my gaze. What visual picture is created here? Yes, the picture is of a small ripples caused in the water by the moving oars, and they're fading away to leave only a long stretch of reflected moonlight in the water in the wake of the boat. So, what does they in the line until they melted all into one track mean? Yes, it means the small ripples in the water. So, proud of his skill to reach a chosen point. So, what skill is the poet proud of? So, he is proud of his own powers as a rower. So, he is proud of his own ability as a rower. So, where did the poet want to reach with the boat? The poet wanted to reach the craggy ridge. So, with an unswerving line, I fixed my gaze. Here, what did the poet fix his view on as he is rowing the boat? Yes, he kept his eyes on the horizon. Upon the summit of a craggy ridge, the horizon's utmost boundary, far above was nothing but the stars and the grey sky. She was an elf in Leslie. So, here we see that he is taken the boat and now he is describing how the boat was. She was an elf in Pinas. What does she refer to? Yes, it is the little boat. And what does elfin mean? It means a very small in size. So, what is the figure of speech used in elfin Pinas then? Yes, it is a metaphor. Now, what quality in the movement of the boat is highlighted in the comparison? So, here we know the boat is compared to the elephant Pinas. So, what quality of the movement has been highlighted here? Yes, the quality highlighted here is the smooth, pleasant and light movement of the boat. Now, let us move to the next lines. I dipped my oars into the silent lake, and as I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan when from behind that craggy steep till then. So, here too the poet continued to describe the boat and how he is rowing. So, what does the poet compare his boat to? So, in earlier lines we saw that he compared it to the elephant Pinas. Now, he is comparing this to something else. What is that? Yes, the swan glidely smoothly in the water. He is comparing it to the swan which moves smoothly in the water. And why does he compare it to the swan? The boat goes heaving through the water gracefully and effortlessly like the swan. Now, next lines. The horizons bound a huge peak, black and huge, as if with voluntary power instinct, upreared its head. I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim shape. So, you can see here. So, as he is rowing, he has come across a huge peak, black and huge. So, what is the tone of the poet when he sees that huge black peak? The poet seems to be scared now. Why is he scared? So, the sudden appearance of huge black peak unnerved him. He got scared. The more he rowed the boat, the bigger the peak seemed to become in front of him. So, how many peaks are mentioned in the poem? Yes, 2 peaks are mentioned. The first one is a craggy ridge the boy wanted to reach, and second one is a black and huge peak which looms suddenly in front of him. Next lines, children. Towered up between me and the stars, and still, for so it seemed, with purpose of its own and measured motions like a living thing, strode after me with trembling oars I returned. And measured motion like a living thing strode after me. So, what strode after the poet? So, he feels that the huge black peak seems to be walking towards the poet in a threatening manner. So, with trembling oars I return. So, when he feels that the peak is following him, what did he do? He returned with trembling oars. So, in the phrase trembling oars, who is trembling here? Yes, the poet is trembling. Now, can you name the figure of speech in this expression? Yes, it is transferred epithet. Now, why is the boy trembling? Yes, he is frightened by the approaching peak. He is feeling that the peak is approaching him. So, the line refers to the movement of the peak. Is it real or imagined by the boy? Is the peak really moving towards him? No, it is the imagination of the boy who is already feeling guilty about his act of stealing the boat. Now, let us move to the next lines. And through the silent water stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. There in a mooring place I left my bark, and through the meadows homeward went in grave. Now, here in these lines what we saw is the poet gets terrified by this huge black shape and immediately turns back. In a great hurry, he goes back to the cave and he moors the boat. He returns home with a grave heart and heavy conscience. So, he is feeling guilty that he had stolen a boat, and actually the nature is warning him and threatening him. and serious mood. But after I had seen that spectacle for many days, my brain worked with dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being over my thoughts. So what does these lines show, children? Yes, the poet reminds us, means he remembers that following that incident of stealing the boat, he had spent many days suffering from nightmares of grim and huge shape. So what is the huge shape here? The peak, right? Now, there hung a darkness, call it solitude or black desertion. No familiar shapes remained, no pleasant images of trees, of sea or sky, no colors of green fields. So you can see how the poet is feeling depressed. He is being haunted by the nightmares of stealing that boat. So he says that the familiar forms, colors and shapes of nature that he had been accustomed to were replaced by the images of this huge mountain. So all those previously he loved nature, but now nature seemed to threaten him. So, but huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men moved slowly through the mind by day and were trouble to my dreams. So what does these lines mean? So this mountain, according to Wordsworth, was not a passive structure made of rocks or stone. It was like a living being, yet different from living beings. It had taken over his thoughts by days and dreams by night. For many a day he was tormented by the memory and solitude. Yes. Now children, when we see the previous year question papers, so some of the questions that's been asked in the question papers is being shown here. So kindly look at those questions, children. So your main could be like this: answer the following questions in 5 to 6 sentences each. So the first question: how does Wordsworth describe the beauty of nature as he rows the boat he had stolen? Yes, as the poet was rowing the boat in the moonlight, he could hear the mountain echoes. As the boat moved in the water, it left behind her a trail of circles glittering in the moon. Far above, he saw nothing but stars and the grey sky. He fixed his view upon a craggy ridge that was the horizon's utmost boundary. The boat, which he compares to an elfin pinnace, moved through the water like a swan. The horizon was bound with a huge peak which loomed black and huge. It seemed to uprear its head and grow in stature with every stroke of the oar that the poet struck to the water. It seemed to tower up between him and the stars. Now let's see the next question. Why did Wordsworth say that his moving the boat is an act of sloth? Why was he guilty of his act? Yes, as he took the boat without the permission of the owner, he considered it as an act of sloth. He was a bit disturbed by his act of stealing someone's property, which made him feel guilty. However, he also had a feeling of joy and thrill of being able to get a hand over the boat. The next question: describe the effect the peak had on the poet's mind. Or what were the effects of moving the boat without the owner's permission on the mind of the poet? Yes, after stealing the boat, the poet rowed it with troubled pleasure, fixing his view upon the summit of a craggy ridge. Suddenly, a huge and black peak put its head up as if it were a living creature, endowed with the willpower of its own. Slowly growing larger in stature, the awful peak seems to stand between him and the stars, seemed to follow him with regular steps. This spectacle remained in his mind for many days, even in his dreams. No pleasant images of trees, sea or sky, no colors of green fields and familiar shapes came to his mind. Huge and mighty forms that do not live moved slowly through his mind. So now the next question could be, what made the poet turn his boat back even before reaching his destination, the craggy ridge? Yes, the form of the huge shape frightened the poet stirred his conscience. He seemed to chase after the poet as he kept drawing the boar away from his moor. Scared of this huge black shape, the poet hurries back towards the cave he had stolen the boat from and returns home with a grave heart and a heavy conscience. To Wordsworth, nature was a living presence. Pick out the 5 details from the poem to support this. The poet calls his boat elf. It is heaving through water like a swan. The huge peak has raised its head as if to stop him from rowing ahead. It is growing larger and larger as if to stand between him and the sky. It is moving as if to follow him. The nature around him seems to stare at him and follow him. The spectacle remained in his mind even in dreams as if it is alive like a living thing. Now children, let's move to the figure of speech. So you know what is a metaphor. Now today we shall see what is transferred epithet means. Now look at this line children. I had a wonderful day. To which parts of speech does the underlined word belong to? Yes, wonderful is an adjective, right? Now, is wonderful describing the speaker who is saying that she had a wonderful day or the day itself? Yes, undoubtedly it is the feeling of the speaker. She is feeling wonderful. Now, let's take another example. It was a careless match. Now, is it the speaker we are talking about here or the match? So, the word careless, which is an adjective, it is talking about the feeling of the speaker and not the match, because match cannot be careless. It is the match being carelessly played by the players. Next, the old man had sleepless night. Now, here too we know sleepless is an adjective here. So, here the old man and the night. Now, look at these two. Now, what does sleepless night describing? Is it describing the old man or the night? Yes, undoubtedly it is describing the old man's emotions, right, that he is not able to sleep and not the night. Now, when an adjective usually used to describe one thing is transferred to another, then it becomes a transferred epithet, right. So, sleepless night is not describing night, but it is transferred to the old man here. So, in the same way we come across this line in the poem, with trembling oars I turned. So, here the trembling oars, does it refer to the oar which is trembling or the poet who is trembling? Yes, it is actually talking about the poet who is trembling, okay, and so it is a transferred epithet. With this children, we have come to the end of a very beautiful poem. Now, let us move on to the assignment. Children, you need to read this poem thoroughly and summarize the poem in your own words if you want to really enjoy the poem. And the second question is, write the unusual experience you have encountered with nature. Yes children, with this we have come to the end of the class. I thoroughly enjoyed teaching you all, but you have to read this poem, understand yourself, and you have to enjoy the essence of the poem. So, will you do that? Yes children. Thank you so much for your patience listening, and have a great time children. God bless you all. Bye children.